The year is 2025. Donald J. Trump has returned to the White House after a contentious election campaign, making history as one of the few U.S. presidents to serve non-consecutive terms. On January 20th, 2025, Trump is inaugurated once again, sparking waves of speculation, debate, and uncertainty across the globe. What will this second term mean for the United States and the rest of the world? How will his return reshape the geopolitical landscape? The world watches closely as the 82-year-old leader prepares to steer the United States through another 4 years, with policies likely to echo his first term while also addressing the challenges and crises that have evolved during his absence. The stage is set for what could be one of the most consequential presidential terms in modern history. Looking back, Trump's first term in office. To understand what lies ahead, one must first revisit Trump's first term from 2017 to 2021. His presidency was marked by an unorthodox approach to governance, characterized by bold decisions, contentious policies, and a reshaping of American foreign policy. Whether it was withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord, renegotiating trade deals, or fostering a complex relationship with global powers like China and Russia, Trump's presidency left a lasting impact. Like his trade war with China aimed to address trade imbalances, but also heightened tensions between the world's two largest economies. A historic summit with North Korea's Kim Jong-un, showcasing Trump's willingness to engage with adversaries. His controversial withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal, which critics argued undermined global security, while supporters claimed it demonstrated strength. He repeatedly criticized NATO allies for failing to meet defense spending commitments, raising questions about the United States' long-term commitment to the alliance. These actions set the tone for Trump's approach to leadership as transactional, unpredictable, and focused on redefining America's role on the global stage. The world since 2021, a changed landscape. Since Trump's departure from the Oval Office in 2021, the global landscape has undergone significant changes. President Joe Biden's administration sought to rebuild alliances, restore traditional diplomacy, and address global challenges like climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the world has continued to face mounting crises, like the Ukraine conflict. Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 marked the largest military conflict in Europe since World War II. The war has reshaped geopolitics, with NATO strengthening its resolve and countries like Finland and Sweden seeking membership. The United States, under Biden, provided substantial military and economic aid to Ukraine, cementing its role as a key ally in the conflict. 2. Rising tensions with China. The U.S.-China rivalry has intensified, with disputes over Taiwan, trade, and technological dominance taking center stage. China's military buildup and assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific have raised alarms across the region. 3. Global economic challenges. Supply chain disruptions, inflation, and the lingering effects of the pandemic have created economic instability worldwide. Countries are grappling with energy crises, food insecurity, and the challenges of transitioning to renewable energy sources. 4. Shifts in global alliances. Emerging powers like India and Brazil are asserting greater influence, while traditional alliances like NATO and the European Union are being tested by internal divisions and external threats. A new beginning, the stakes of Trump's second term. As Trump begins his second term, the stakes are higher than ever. The decisions made over the next 4 years will not only shape America's future, but also have profound implications for the rest of the world. Will Trump's return mark a continuation of his America First agenda? Will he seek to redefine global power dynamics once more? Or will the challenges of a changed world compel him to adopt a different approach? To provide context, let us imagine the perspective of those directly impacted by Trump's policies. Consider the story of Elena, a young Ukrainian woman whose family's survival depends on U.S. support against Russian aggression. Or think of James, a NATO official in Brussels, anxiously watching as Trump's rhetoric and decisions shape the alliance's future. These personal narratives illustrate the human stakes behind the political maneuvering. The path forward. Trump's second term will likely revolve around several key themes. 1. Revisiting NATO. Trump's critiques of NATO during his first term led to increased defense spending by some member states. However, questions remain about whether his second term will strengthen or weaken the alliance. 2. The Ukraine question. Trump's approach to the ongoing conflict will be a defining feature of his presidency. Will he push for a peace deal that freezes the front lines? How will his actions impact U.S.-Europe relations? 3. China and the Indo-Pacific. As China's global ambitions grow, Trump's response will be closely watched. Will he prioritize containing China's influence over maintaining commitments in Europe and the Middle East? 4. Energy and economy. Domestic and international energy policies, along with economic priorities, will play a crucial role in shaping global markets and climate action. The world stands at a crossroads. As Trump takes office, Leaders, diplomats, and ordinary citizens alike brace for a new era of uncertainty and possibility. What unfolds over the next 4 years will be a story of power, ambition, and the ever-shifting dynamics of a globalized world. The Ukraine conflict, a defining global crisis. At the heart of global geopolitics lies the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, a struggle that has not only defined the European security landscape, but also tested the resolve of alliances like NATO and the European Union. Since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, the war has become a symbol of resistance against aggression and a case study in the complexities of modern warfare. As Trump begins his second term, the question on everyone's mind is, how will his administration approach this crisis? To understand the stakes, one must first examine the conflict's evolution and the role the United States has played so far. The evolution of the Ukraine conflict. Ukraine's struggle with Russian aggression dates back to 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea and began supporting separatist movements in eastern Ukraine. The situation escalated dramatically in February 2022, when Russian forces launched a full-scale invasion. What followed was a devastating war that reshaped global geopolitics. 1. Military stalemate. Despite initial Russian advances, Ukrainian forces, bolstered by Western support, mounted a fierce resistance. Key battles in Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Kherson demonstrated Ukraine's resilience and Russia's overestimation of its own military capabilities. 2. Economic warfare. Sanctions imposed by Western nations crippled Russia's economy, while energy prices surged worldwide. The conflict highlighted Europe's dependence on Russian energy and accelerated the shift toward renewable energy sources. 3. Humanitarian crisis. Millions of Ukrainians were displaced, creating one of the largest refugee crises in modern history. The war also drew attention to human rights violations and war crimes committed by Russian forces. 4. Global divides. The conflict polarized the world, with Western nations rallying behind Ukraine, while countries like China and India maintained a more neutral stance, focusing on their own strategic interests. Trump's potential approach to Ukraine. During his 2024 campaign, Trump made bold claims about ending the Ukraine conflict within 24 hours of taking office. While such promises are often rhetorical, they underscore his intention to take a different approach from his predecessor. Here are the key aspects of what his policy might entail. 1. A push for negotiated peace. Trump has repeatedly expressed skepticism about the level of U.S. financial and military support for Ukraine. He has argued that Europe should bear a greater share of the burden, given the conflict's proximity to European borders. His administration is likely to prioritize a peace deal, potentially involving the following elements. Freezing the front lines. Trump may propose an agreement to halt hostilities and establish a demilitarized zone along the current front lines. Such a deal would likely leave parts of eastern Ukraine under Russian control, solidifying Russia's territorial gains. Neutrality for Ukraine. A key component could involve barring Ukraine from joining NATO, a demand Russia has long insisted upon. This would mirror the Finlandization model, where Ukraine remains independent but neutral in its foreign policy. Economic incentives. Trump might leverage economic tools, such as sanctions relief for Russia, to encourage compliance with a peace agreement. While such a strategy might bring an immediate end to hostilities, it risks alienating Ukraine and its European allies. Critics argue that it could embolden Russia and set a dangerous precedent for resolving conflicts through territorial concessions. 2. Reduction in U.S. aid to Ukraine. The United States has been Ukraine's largest supporter, providing nearly $91 billion in combined military, economic, and humanitarian assistance since 2022. Trump's criticism of this expenditure suggests that his administration may significantly reduce aid, redirecting resources to domestic priorities or other strategic objectives, such as countering China. 3. Direct diplomacy with Russia. Trump's relationship with Vladimir Putin has been a subject of intense scrutiny. During his first term, Trump often spoke positively about the Russian leader, sparking controversy. If this dynamic continues, Trump may bypass traditional diplomatic channels to negotiate directly with the Kremlin. Such an approach could expedite negotiations, but might also undermine Ukraine's position and strain U.S.-European relations. European reactions and implications. Trump's potential policy shifts are likely to have profound implications for Europe. As the primary theater of the conflict, European nations have a vested interest in its resolution. However, their priorities and strategies may not align with Trump's approach. 1. NATO's role. NATO has been a cornerstone of Ukraine's defense strategy, providing training, intelligence, and logistical support. Trump's previous criticisms of NATO's funding disparities have already created tensions within the alliance. A reduction in U.S. support for Ukraine could weaken NATO's cohesion and force European nations to shoulder a greater burden. 2. Economic challenges. Europe has already committed over $133 billion in aid to Ukraine, outpacing U.S. contributions in some areas. However, sustained support will require significant economic sacrifices. European nations may face tough decisions about reallocating resources from domestic programs to military and humanitarian aid. 3. Political divisions. Trump's approach could exacerbate divisions within Europe. Countries like Poland and the Baltic states, which view Russia as an existential threat, are likely to push for continued support for Ukraine. Meanwhile, nations like France and Germany may advocate for a more pragmatic approach, focusing on diplomacy and economic stability. Global implications of a Trump-led peace deal. Trump's strategy for Ukraine will have ripple effects far beyond Europe. The outcome of his policies could reshape global power dynamics and influence how other conflicts are resolved. Key implications include: 1. Lessons for authoritarian regimes. A negotiated settlement that rewards Russia's aggression could embolden other authoritarian regimes. For example, China. Beijing may view a favorable outcome for Russia as a green light to pursue its territorial ambitions, particularly in Taiwan, Iran, and North Korea. Both nations could see such a precedent as an opportunity to advance their own agendas without fear of significant international repercussions. 2. The role of emerging powers. Countries like India, Brazil, and South Africa have sought to balance relationships with both the West and Russia. Trump's approach could influence their strategic calculations, potentially driving them closer to or further from U.S. alignment. 3. Nuclear proliferation risks. If Ukraine is forced to concede territory and remains outside NATO, it may seek alternative means of securing its sovereignty, including the development of nuclear weapons. Such a move could trigger a regional arms race, with Poland and other nations considering similar measures. Amid the high-stakes diplomacy and geopolitical maneuvering, the human cost of the Ukraine conflict cannot be ignored. Millions of lives have been upended, families separated, and communities destroyed. Consider the story of Oksana, a Ukrainian nurse who fled to Poland with her children after her hometown was shelled. She represents the resilience of ordinary Ukrainians who have endured unimaginable hardship. For them, the decisions made in Washington, Brussels, and Moscow are not abstract calculations. They are matters of survival. As Trump's second term unfolds, his approach to the Ukraine conflict will serve as a litmus test for his foreign policy. Will he prioritize a swift resolution, even at the cost of long-term stability? Or will he navigate the complexities of the conflict with a balanced strategy that safeguards U.S. interests while supporting global security? The answers to these questions will shape the trajectory of the conflict and set the tone for America's role in the world. In the next part, we will explore Trump's relationship with NATO and its implications for European defense in an era of shifting alliances and mounting challenges. Trump's relationship with NATO, a fragile alliance. During his first term in office, Donald Trump's stance on NATO was a source of tension and controversy. As the United States' primary military alliance, NATO has played a pivotal role in maintaining global security since its establishment in 1949. However, Trump's criticisms of the alliance, particularly regarding the financial contributions of member states, created rifts that many feared could weaken its cohesion. Trump's second term is likely to revive these debates, with far-reaching implications for European defense and transatlantic relations. To understand what lies ahead, it is crucial to examine Trump's history with NATO, the current state of the alliance, and the challenges it faces in a rapidly changing world. Throughout his first term, Trump repeatedly criticized NATO members for failing to meet the agreed-upon defense spending target of 2% of GDP. While this commitment was established in 2014 in response to Russia's annexation of Crimea, by 2018, only 5 NATO countries besides the United States had met the target. Trump's frustration was palpable, as he often accused European nations of free-riding on American military power while neglecting their own defense obligations. His rhetoric included threats to reduce U.S. involvement in NATO or even withdraw entirely, a move that would have catastrophic consequences for the alliance. Despite these tensions, Trump's criticisms did lead to some positive outcomes. Several NATO countries increased their defense budgets, and the alliance took steps to modernize its capabilities. However, the question remains: will Trump's return to office reignite old divisions, or will it push NATO to further adapt to new security challenges? As of 2025, NATO faces a complex set of challenges that test its unity and effectiveness. The Ukraine war. Russia's ongoing aggression in Ukraine has reinvigorated NATO's purpose as a deterrent against external threats. Finland and Sweden's decisions to join the alliance underscore its importance in ensuring regional security. However, the war has also exposed disparities in member states' military capabilities and financial contributions. Defense spending gaps. While more countries have reached the 2% defense spending target, others continue to fall short. As of late 2024, 8 NATO members, including Canada, Italy, and Spain, still spend less than 2% of their GDP on defense. This uneven commitment remains a point of contention, particularly for countries like Poland and the Baltic states, which view Russia as an existential threat. Emerging threats. Beyond Russia, NATO must contend with a range of emerging threats, including cyber attacks, hybrid warfare, and the rise of China as a global military power. These challenges require NATO to expand its strategic focus and invest in new capabilities. Trump's potential impact on NATO. Trump's second term could bring significant changes to NATO, both in terms of policy and perception. His approach is likely to center on 3 key areas. 1. Pressure for increased defense spending. Trump's previous demands for greater financial contributions from NATO members are unlikely to wane. If anything, his administration may adopt an even more aggressive stance, potentially tying U.S. commitments to measurable increases in European defense spending. This could include new spending targets, advocating for an updated defense spending target of 2.5% or even 3% of GDP. Conditional support, conditioning. U.S. military aid or participation in joint exercises on member states meeting their financial obligations. While such measures might incentivize some countries to boost their defense budgets, they could also strain relations within the alliance. 2. Re-evaluation of U.S. commitments. During his first term, Trump flirted with the idea of reducing U.S. troop deployments in Europe or withdrawing from NATO altogether. While a formal withdrawal is unlikely due to legislative safeguards, Trump could still take steps to reduce America's presence in Europe, such as closing military bases or reducing troop numbers in countries like Germany and Italy. Scaling back participation in NATO's rapid response initiatives. Withholding support for NATO's collective defense clause, Article 5 in certain scenarios. Such actions would undermine NATO's deterrent capabilities and force European nations to assume greater responsibility for their own defense. 3. Shift in strategic priorities. Trump's foreign policy has often emphasized a focus on America first, prioritizing domestic interests and reducing international commitments. In a second term, this could translate into a pivot to Asia, redirecting resources from Europe to counter China's growing influence in the Indo-Pacific. Reduced engagement in Ukraine, limiting U.S. involvement in the Ukraine conflict and encouraging Europe to take the lead. Focus on bilateral deals, pursuing bilateral agreements with individual NATO members rather than strengthening the alliance as a whole. Europe's response, strengthening regional defense. In anticipation of a potential reduction in U.S. support, European nations are already taking steps to bolster their own defense capabilities. Key developments include 1. Increased defense. Spending countries like Poland, Estonia, and Latvia have significantly increased their defense budgets, with some spending over 3% of their GDP on military capabilities. These nations are also investing in advanced weaponry, cybersecurity, and infrastructure to counter potential threats. 2. Regional defense initiatives. European nations are exploring ways to enhance regional cooperation outside of NATO. For example, the European Defence Fund, EDF, aimed at fostering collaboration on defense research and development. PESCO, Permanent Structured Cooperation, an EU framework for joint defense projects. Bilateral agreements. Enhanced partnerships between countries like France and Germany to coordinate defense strategies. 3. Independent nuclear deterrence countries like France and the United Kingdom, which already possess nuclear weapons, may play a larger role in Europe's defense strategy. Additionally, nations like Poland could pursue nuclear sharing arrangements, or even develop their own arsenals if U.S. support wanes. While these measures demonstrate Europe's commitment to its own defense, they also present significant challenges. Economic strain. Increased defense spending requires reallocating resources from other priorities, such as healthcare and social programs. This could lead to domestic unrest and political backlash. Coordination issues. Divergent national interests and bureaucratic hurdles could hinder the effectiveness of regional defense initiatives. Dependence on U.S. technology. Despite efforts to reduce reliance on the US, European nations still depend heavily on American military technology and intelligence. Amid the policy debates and strategic calculations, the men and women who serve in NATO play a critical role in ensuring the alliance's effectiveness. Consider the story of Captain Anna Weiss, a German officer stationed in Lithuania as part of NATO's enhanced forward presence. For Anna, the alliance represents more than just a political commitment. It is a promise to protect the values of democracy and freedom. Anna's perspective highlights the human stakes of NATO's mission. Every decision made by leaders in Washington, Brussels, and Moscow has real-world implications for the soldiers, diplomats, and civilians on the ground. As Trump's second term unfolds, NATO faces one of the most critical periods in its history. The alliance must navigate internal divisions, external threats, and the evolving priorities of its most influential member. Whether it emerges stronger or weaker will depend on its ability to adapt to new realities while maintaining its core mission of collective defense. The ripple effects of American policy in a multipolar world. As Donald Trump's second term begins, the United States stands at the center of a shifting global order. The world is no longer defined solely by the Cold War-era dichotomy of American and Soviet power. Instead, it is a multipolar landscape, with emerging powers like China and India asserting influence alongside established players like the European Union and Russia. Trump's foreign policy decisions will inevitably have ripple effects across regions far beyond Europe. From the Indo-Pacific to the Middle East, the global implications of his second term are profound. The Indo-Pacific, China, Taiwan, and the new Cold War. 1. Rising tensions in the Taiwan Strait. One of the most pressing challenges facing the United States is the potential for a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. As a democratic ally and a critical hub for semiconductor manufacturing, Taiwan holds immense strategic importance for the United States. Beijing's growing military capabilities and assertive rhetoric have raised alarms worldwide. Trump's approach to Taiwan will likely prioritize economic and military deterrence. However, his administration may also seek to balance these measures with a focus on reducing U.S. commitments elsewhere. Key considerations include military buildup, strengthening U.S. military presence in the Indo-Pacific, including the deployment of naval assets and advanced missile systems. Economic leverage, expanding trade and investment ties with Taiwan while imposing economic costs on China for aggressive actions. Alliances, deepening partnerships with regional allies like Japan, South Korea, and Australia to form a united front against Chinese expansionism. 2. Implications of U.S. focus on Asia. A shift in U.S. priorities toward the Indo-Pacific could have significant consequences for Europe and the Middle East. If Trump reallocates resources and attention to countering China, other regions may face reduced American engagement, creating power vacuums that could be exploited by adversaries. The Middle East has long been a focal point of U.S. foreign policy, but Trump's second term may see a further reduction in American involvement. His administration's America First approach emphasizes minimizing entanglements in costly conflicts. Likely policy shifts include normalization agreements, continuing to broker normalization deals between Israel and Arab states, building on the Abraham Accords. Energy policy, balancing U.S. energy independence with the strategic importance of the region's oil and gas reserves. Counterterrorism, maintaining a limited presence to combat extremist groups while avoiding large-scale interventions. As the U.S. reduces its footprint, regional powers like Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey are likely to compete for influence. This could lead to increased proxy conflicts, escalation of tensions in Yemen, Syria, and Iraq. Nuclear proliferation risks. Renewed efforts by Iran to develop nuclear capabilities, potentially triggering a regional arms race. Shifts in alliances. Greater alignment between Iran, China, and Russia as they seek to counter U.S. influence. Nuclear proliferation, a looming threat. Trump's foreign policy decisions could inadvertently accelerate nuclear proliferation. As U.S. commitments to traditional alliances are questioned, some nations may feel compelled to develop their own nuclear arsenals as a deterrent. 1. Ukraine and Poland. If Trump's policies lead to reduced U.S. support for Ukraine and NATO, countries like Ukraine and Poland might pursue nuclear capabilities. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has already hinted at this possibility, emphasizing the need for security guarantees in the absence of NATO membership. 2. Middle Eastern powers. In the Middle East, Iran's nuclear ambitions could drive countries like Saudi Arabia and Turkey to follow suit. The resulting arms race would destabilize an already volatile region. 3. East Asia. A diminished U.S. presence in the Indo-Pacific could prompt Japan and South Korea to reconsider their non-nuclear policies, especially in the face of Chinese and North Korean threats. As the world's largest democracy and a rising economic power, India plays a crucial role in the global balance of power. Trump's administration is likely to strengthen ties with India as a counterweight to China. This could involve military cooperation, joint exercises, arms sales, and intelligence sharing. Economic partnerships, expanding trade agreements, and supporting India's digital and infrastructure initiatives. Strategic alliances, encouraging India's leadership within multilateral forums like the Quad, Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. Brazil and South Africa, as leaders in their respective regions, have the potential to influence global dynamics. Trump's administration may seek to engage with these nations through bilateral agreements and trade partnerships, though ideological differences could pose challenges. Climate change and global cooperation. Trump's approach to climate policy will likely emphasize domestic energy production over international agreements. This could have several consequences. 1. Weakening of global climate initiatives. A withdrawal or reduced commitment to initiatives like the Paris Agreement could hinder global efforts to combat climate change. Emerging economies may feel less compelled to meet their targets, exacerbating environmental challenges. 2. Increased geopolitical competition. The transition to renewable energy will create new geopolitical dynamics as nations compete for control of critical resources like lithium and rare earth metals. Countries with significant reserves, such as China and Chile, will play pivotal roles in shaping the global energy landscape. Amid the geopolitical shifts and high-level negotiations, the impact on ordinary people cannot be ignored. Consider the story of Mei Lin, a Taiwanese entrepreneur who navigates the uncertainty of potential conflict while running a tech startup. Or think of Ahmed, a young Yemeni activist striving for peace in a war-torn region. Their experiences highlight the human stakes of policy decisions made thousands of miles away. Uncertainty in a complex world. Trump's second term will be defined by its ability to adapt to the challenges of a multipolar world. From managing great power competition to addressing the existential threats of climate change and nuclear proliferation, the stakes could not be higher. The choices made in Washington will reverberate across continents, shaping the future of nations and individuals alike. As Donald Trump begins his second term, his choice of key cabinet members and advisors will provide critical insights into the direction of his administration. These individuals will not only shape policy, but also influence how the United States navigates the complex global landscape over the next 4 years. 1. The National Security Team. Trump's selection of a national security advisor and Secretary of State will set the tone for his foreign policy agenda. Early reports suggest that his picks may include individuals with strong, hawkish views, such as Senator Marco Rubio as Secretary of State and Congressman Mike Waltz as National Security Advisor. Rubio's perspective. Known for his focus on China and human rights, Rubio's approach could emphasize a hard line against Beijing while advocating for stronger ties with democratic allies. Waltz's role. A staunch advocate for military preparedness, Waltz's appointment would signal a focus on strengthening U.S. defense capabilities and countering global adversaries. 2. Domestic priorities with global implications. Trump's economic team will also play a pivotal role in shaping foreign policy. Appointments to positions like the Treasury Secretary and Trade Representative will influence decisions on sanctions, trade agreements, and economic policies that impact global markets. Future scenarios for Trump's second term. 1. Best case scenario, strategic stability. In this scenario, Trump leverages his deal-making approach to achieve strategic wins without alienating allies or emboldening adversaries. Key outcomes include Ukraine peace deal. A negotiated settlement freezes the conflict and establishes a demilitarized zone, allowing Ukraine to rebuild while ensuring Russia's territorial ambitions are contained. Strengthened NATO. European nations increased defense spending, solidifying the alliance and reducing U.S. financial burdens. Containment of China. A combination of economic and military deterrence prevents Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific. Energy and climate balance. The U.S. boosts domestic energy production while investing in renewable technologies, maintaining economic growth and addressing climate challenges. 2. Worst-case scenario. Global instability. In this outcome, Trump's policies exacerbate global tensions, leading to widespread instability. Potential developments include breakdown of NATO. Reduced U.S. support undermines the alliance, leaving Europe vulnerable to Russian aggression. Prolonged Ukraine conflict. A failed peace process leads to a protracted war, draining resources and destabilizing the region. Chinese expansion. U.S. disengagement from Asia emboldens China to invade Taiwan, triggering a major conflict. Nuclear proliferation. Countries like Ukraine, Poland, and Japan develop nuclear weapons, escalating global security risks. 3. Most likely scenario, mixed outcomes. A more nuanced scenario is one of mixed successes and failures. Trump's policies may achieve some short-term gains, but fail to address long-term challenges. For example, Ukraine. A fragile ceasefire is achieved, but the conflict remains unresolved, with periodic flare-ups. NATO. The alliance endures but faces ongoing tensions over funding and strategic priorities. China. The U.S. manages to deter major aggression but struggles to counter China's growing influence in Africa and Latin America. Climate policy. Domestic energy policies dominate, leading to limited progress on global climate initiatives. Trump's second term will test the durability of U.S. leadership in a multipolar world. His America First approach may prioritize domestic gains, but could risk ceding influence to rivals like China and Russia. The challenge lies in balancing national interests with global responsibilities. As the U.S. recalibrates its commitments, regional powers like India, Brazil, and Germany may step into leadership roles. Their ability to navigate complex issues, from trade to security, will shape the future of global governance. The future of multilateralism. Trump's skepticism toward international organizations could weaken institutions like the United Nations and the World Trade Organization. However, this may also spur reforms, as other nations seek to adapt these institutions to the realities of the 21st century. Reflections from 2029. Imagine it is now January 2029. A journalist reflects on the transformative events of Trump's second term. Stories of resilience and hardship emerge from every corner of the globe. In Ukraine, a young entrepreneur rebuilds her business in a city scarred by war, symbolizing the enduring spirit of the Ukrainian people. In Taiwan, a tech innovator continues to drive progress despite the looming threat of conflict, showcasing the island's resilience. In the U.S., communities debate the legacy of Trump's policies, grappling with their impact on both domestic and global affairs. These human stories remind us that behind every policy decision are individuals whose lives are forever changed. A pivotal chapter in history. Donald Trump's second term will be remembered as a pivotal chapter in the story of the 21st century. Whether it ushers in an era of strategic stability or global upheaval will depend on the choices made by leaders, the resilience of institutions, and the will of ordinary people. As the world moves forward, the lessons of these 4 years will serve as a guide for navigating the complexities of an interconnected and uncertain future. The road ahead is fraught with challenges, but it is also rich with opportunities to build a more stable, prosperous, and just world.